The Viking Age. Everyone seems to know about it and have some sort of opinion on it and what effects it had. Ask an Anglo, and they'll probably tell you that's when England became a country and fought off the barbarian invaders. Ask a Continental, and they'll probably go on about trade routes or manliness or some shit. And ask a nation? Well, I don't know what would happen if you asked them, but they'd probably say something about it. Not that you'd be able to understand them. I, though, am willing to tell you that the Viking Age was the greatest period in all of history, and want to share my thoughts on why that is, by going through every major aspect of it, from the raiding, trading, and blading each other with swords, and go through what is generally considered good, bad, and what is just kind of there about the Vikings, and tell you why all of it is actually great. Now with that out of the way, time to... In recent years, more and more people have started acknowledging more of what the Vikings did as good. I mean, it can be argued that without the Vikings' excessive establishing of new trade routes through the land south of them, we wouldn't even have the entity of Europe as it is connected today, having it rather just be seen as a part of a much larger entity of Eurasia. Is it a bit much to credit the Vikings with creating what is essentially modern Europe? No, not at all really. And I won't accept any other so-called claims. With their fine ships, they were able to traverse any waters that lie in their way, whether it be ocean or river. And with their finely made swords, they could either defeat anyone in battle, or impress the locals enough to give them a role in their society, as in Constantinople. In their travels, they made areas such as Greece, which had always been more connected with, let's say, Egypt than what lay north, actually begin their connection with more of the northern parts of Europe, shifting the central balance of Europe further north in the process, which is always a good thing. But in the travels of the Vikings, they also helped establish both countries and cities that we consider essential to Europe today. Barring the exception of the Kingdom of England mentioned earlier, for obvious reasons, who doesn't love the port city of Dublin? Speaking of Ireland, the Vikings are also responsible for giving the Isle of Emerald their first taste of the multiculturalism that we love so much today, having bought African slaves from the Arabs in the Mediterranean and taking them up their trade routes to be sold in Ireland. Cultural enrichment at its finest. Bringing some new fresh words into the Scottish dialect is also a very nice example of this. But I mustn't forget the East either, for over there, we would greatly miss the country of Russia, were it not for the Vikings, now wouldn't we? A tradition you'll likely see in every European city to this day is graffiti, and the Vikings can also claim to be the originators of even this European staple, in Haldan's inscription on the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, letting everyone know where he was when he wrote it. What a swell guy. I would of course be remiss if I didn't mention the technological innovations that the Vikings had with them too. Inventions like the longship helped them traverse further than any man had gone before, establishing the first ever European colony in America in the process. Granted, it didn't last that long, but would have served as an excellent set of incidents for the natives to learn from for later, unless worthy men arrived in the New World. If only they had learned anything at all from Vinland. But no matter, the Vikings were also really good with making better and sharper weapons than anyone else in Europe, leading to, of course, better performance in combat, but also something Europe would have a lot more fun with later. Torture. The Vikings with their sharper equipment pioneered a new way for people to slowly lose both life and hope by slicing open their backs, cutting out what is necessary to get to their lungs, and laying them on their back like the wings of an eagle. Truly a precursor to our modern surgeries, which wouldn't exist without the Vikings' ingenuity. Now to the points that are often considered bad by the people of the contemporary world. Holmgang, the practice of fighting each other to settle a disagreement, for example, is often pointed to as a rather brutish way of solving either personal or legal issues, compared to our modern cases of legal cases or settling things in a council. But here's the thing. When handling any legal case, you have to go through a lot of paper and bureaucracy, and even spend quite a sum of money to handle what could even be a minor issue. At points like that, it feels like you could just die. Well, back in the Viking Age, one first of all didn't have to do all that, avoiding untold stress and anxiety, but even if you felt like you could die because of your legal trouble, you very well could in the settlement. That's not to say that Holmgang was a fight to the death necessarily. You could always agree on just drawing first blood instead. If you're a pussy, that is. Another aspect of the Vikings which is often viewed as negative was their incessant raiding and pillaging of towns and cities. This though, as well as the last one, was really not as bad as it seems. Think about it. If a town was spotted that seemed excessive with riches and gold, wouldn't you want to steal from it too? If you're not one to act on such impulses, fair enough, but here is where it actually turns into a blessing in disguise. Tell me, have you ever wanted to punch someone who flexes their riches in your face? Of course you have. People like that are annoying as all heck. The same is true for settlements. Any settlement that actively taunts its neighbors in the open with its riches is bound for a smacking to set it on the right course again. A script from a neighboring settlement of Lindisfarne that was written right after the Viking raid there says as follows. Those sons and daughters of whores had it coming. By actively going out to raid places like this, the Vikings made the settlements and towns of the world more humble and less annoying, which in effect made them quite a lot comfier to live in, and reducing the hate one feels for his neighboring town. The last point about the Viking Age that is often considered bad is the excessive warmongering that they always seem to be up to. This is, of course, claimed most adamantly by those who were on the receiving end of the Viking invasions, like the English or the French. #Vikings in Paris. But as a certain Viking king Eirik Bloodaxe is noted to have said in many sagas while reclaiming Northumbria and invading England in the process, this is not war, this is pest control. Now, you may be wondering what I mean by it's just kind of there. Well, that's the stuff the average guy doesn't really think much about when thinking about Vikings. Stuff like the way their mail shirts were constructed, or what kind of alcohol they drank. So let's start off with the language that they spoke. The language spoken by the Vikings throughout the Viking Age was Old Norse, though it did start branching off into different paths towards the end. This language can perhaps be considered the origin of all languages. For more information about how all of the world's languages have their origins in Scandinavia, check out Atlantica by Olaus Rudbeck. If this isn't enough to entice you, then consider this. The alphabet, or runes, that the Vikings used were perhaps the most convenient writing system ever, with only straight lines present, allowing it to easily be carved into whatever surface you might fancy. Paper was merely an option, and quite a bothersome and expensive one indeed. So yeah, that's pretty cool, and overall, I think we can all agree that the Viking Age was pretty cool, and I hope that I've convinced the people who didn't think so already that it is, or that I've given you even more reasons to think it the best period in all of history. And if you don't, then I am very, very angry. I am very, very cross. Go to your room. Thank you. För vi träffar den vi väntar på. Vi vill ha en drömmedam, en äkta fjäng av fin dam, en sån som man kan se på kino. En dame man är stolt att ha, men kom och se på mig dame, så mycket tränger oss i.